ridiculous extension cord, and scurrying back to her house like a raccoon caught in a garbage can. The silence that followed was magical. Karen's mouth opened and closed, her brain desperately trying to come up with an excuse. Her loyal followers slowly backed away, pretending they suddenly had urgent business elsewhere. I sighed dramatically. "Look, Karen, I'd hate to escalate things. But this..." I gestured toward the letter. "This is serious business. You might want to just pay the bill and move on." Karen's nostrils flared. "I am not paying a fake power bill." I shrugged. "Then I guess HOA will have no choice but to take action." She stomped her foot. "There is no HOA." "Funny," I said, pulling out another piece of paper. "Because I just received confirmation from the HOA compliance office." I handed her the official audit report, which was nothing more than a printed-out spreadsheet with a few made-up numbers. "Says here your house has been drawing more power than any other in the neighborhood. That's a serious violation." Karen made a sound somewhere between a growl and a scream. She turned on her heel and stormed back to her house, slamming the door behind her. I knew this wasn't over. Karen never accepted defeat, no matter how obviously wrong she was. She'd fight this, try to find some loophole or ridiculous excuse. But I had one final move left, and it was going to push her right over the edge. I picked up my phone and made a call. "Hey Tim. You still got that suit and clipboard?" Tim laughed on the other end. "Oh, this is gonna be good." "Damn right," I said. "Time to send in the inspector." The next morning, I sat on my porch with my coffee, waiting for the final act of this masterpiece to unfold. Karen had gone radio silent after our last conversation, which meant she was either plotting a counterattack or trying to erase any evidence of her little power heist. Either way, she had no idea what was coming next. Right on schedule, Tim arrived in his finest disguise, a cheap suit, clipboard in hand, and an expression of absolute authority. He had worked in a law office before, but he could have been an actor with the way he carried himself. With his hair slicked back and his glasses perched on the edge of his nose, he looked every bit the official inspector he was pretending to be. I gave him a quick nod, and he marched straight toward Karen's house with the kind of confidence that made people nervous. He didn't even knock. He just rang the doorbell 3 times, like he had better things to do than wait. From my porch, I could hear Karen shuffling inside. A few seconds later, the door swung open, and there she stood, still in her robe, looking far less aggressive than usual. The power bill had clearly rattled her, and now she was face to face with what she thought was an actual inspector. Tim cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to conduct an official compliance review regarding unauthorized power usage under the Farm Utility Homeowners Association." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She blinked a few times. "The what?" Tim sighed like he had explained this 100 times already. "Farm Utility Homeowners Association. HOA. You should have received a notice." Karen clutched the letter she had been waving around yesterday, holding it out like it was a shield. "This is a scam. I don't owe anyone $10,000. Tim flipped through his clipboard, nodding like he was reading something important. "Well, ma'am, according to our records, your property has been consuming an unauthorized amount of electricity. That places you in violation of subsection B, Article 12, which, as you know, carries significant penalties." Karen's face turned red. "That's ridiculous. I don't even..." She stopped, realizing that denying it would be pointless. She had already seen the video. "This is harassment. I'll sue." Tim didn't even blink. "Ma'am, you are, of course, free to pursue legal action, but given that you've already been documented in noncompliance, I'd strongly advise against it. The penalties for power theft are steep." Karen let out a noise somewhere between a growl and a gasp. "I didn't steal anything." Tim clicked his pen and wrote something on his clipboard. "Noted." Karen grabbed the edge of her doorframe like she needed it to stay upright. "You can't just show up here and threaten me." "I have rights." Tim nodded. "Absolutely. But we also have an obligation to ensure compliance. At this point, we have no choice but to escalate the matter. Karen's expression flickered with something close to fear. Escalate how? Tim flipped to a new page on his clipboard. If payment is not received within 72 hours, your property will be subject to immediate power disconnection. Following that, a lien may be placed on your home for the outstanding balance. Karen's face drained of color. You can't cut off my power. Tim glanced at her front yard, where her ridiculous pink flamingo lawn ornaments stood like sentries. I see you have decorative lighting. Those will, of course, also be affected. Karen looked like she might actually pass out. This is insane. Tim scribbled something again, nodding. So, just to clarify, you're refusing to pay? Karen sputtered, flailing her arms. I'm not paying for something that isn't real. Tim pursed his lips. Well, in that case. He pulled a bright orange notice from his clipboard and slapped it against her door. Karen yelped like he had just thrown a bucket of ice water on her. What is that? Official disconnection notice, Tim said, completely deadpan. You'll want to make arrangements before the deadline. Karen snatched the paper off her door, scanning it with wide eyes. I could only imagine what was going through her mind. She probably thought her entire house was about to go dark. Then, as if on cue, she turned and bolted inside. Tim walked back toward me, keeping his expression professional until he was out of Karen's view. The second he stepped onto my porch, he grinned. She's losing it. I laughed, shaking my head. That was a damn fine performance. Tim took a sip from the beer I handed him, glancing back at Karen's house. You think she'll actually pay? Not a chance, I said. But that's not the point. The real electric company showed up 2 days later, but not for me. Apparently, Karen had tried to call them in a last-ditch effort to prove the power bill was fake. Instead, they ended up doing an inspection of their own, one that revealed a whole list of violations from Karen's tampering with the lines. That's when things really fell apart for her. The fines weren't $10,000. They were $25,000. The electric company wasn't messing around. Illegal modifications, power theft, safety hazards, she had racked up a serious bill. I sat on my porch as she screamed at the technician, flailing her arms in the air while her husband stood behind her, looking like he wanted to disappear. Greg tried to reason with her. Karen, you did this to yourself. Karen turned on him like a wild animal. You're supposed to be on my side. Greg threw his hands up. I told you not to plug into the farm. Karen ignored him, turning back to the technician. There has to be something you can do. The tech shook his head. Ma'am, this is an official violation. There's nothing I can do. You're lucky the state isn't pressing criminal charges. Karen made a strangled noise and stomped her foot so hard her slipper flew off. The best part was when she stormed inside and slammed the door so hard one of her flamingos tipped over. Greg, meanwhile, just stood there for a moment before shaking his head and walking off